Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back on another video from Annie News, and he has started doing a cut content series on Season 1 of Overlord, and I think this is boss because his cut content series, I do believe, started covering bits in Season 3 of Overlord, showing how the story was changed and moved around and stuff, and then he's gone and done all these other cut content series since. So I think it's boss that he's coming back to the series that started it all and going from the beginning. Because Season 4, I can't wait for Season 4 of Overlord. Oh my god, I've wanted it so bad for ages, and now, boom, we're going to get reminders of stuff and we're going to see how things have changed in the story up to. I hope he covers the whole thing. If he doesn't, fair enough, it's a lot. But go to the link in the description, get that original video liked and that, so he does keep on with the series, because I absolutely love these cut content videos, especially now that we're seeing Overlord stuff. Right, so let's get into it. This is gonna be amazing.
As I've said before, Overlord as a series has quite a bit of depth to it.
Yep.
There's so much more to it than
looks sick.
Anime. That doesn't mean the anime isn't good in its own way, but
It's amazing.
It does mean that there's a whole lot of lore and insight that we're missing out on.
Cover it. Tell us. Explain.
To the characters and the world that kind of change the way the story is depicted from light novel to anime. So, with Season 4 right around
it's gonna be good.
I figured now would be a good time to finally go back and see how many of you would actually be interested in this.
Me, I am.
I'm not sure if I'll be able to get through all 3 seasons.
Don't blame you.
If you do want to see more, then be sure to leave a like and comment. That way I can gauge how often I want to mix this type of video in with my regular content.
Cool.
Episode 1, The End and the Beginning.
Cool.
Covering chapters 1 and 2 from Volume 1 of the light novel.
Yes.
In the near
The
future,
art in the light novels just looks so good.
The genre
Going back to Idrisil.
MMORPGs have been made possible via what's called a neuro-nano interface.
Okay.
This is a highly complex intracranial nanocomputer network that allows the players to experience the world of the game as if it was their own reality.
Which is sick.
Sensation included.
Oof.
Fast forward to the year 2126, and the game we know as Idrisil was released under the premise of a sensory-based MMO. It was a new entry into the genre that would rise to the peak of popularity due to the immense level of freedom that it gave to its players.
And everyone left.
Well, take something as fundamental as the class system,
Oh
for example.
my god.
In the game of Yggdrasil, there were over 2,000 different basic or advanced classes to choose
That's a
from,
lot.
each capable of being leveled up to a max of 15 levels. So, with the player level cap maxing out at 100, that meant that any player could possess at least 7 classes by the time they reached that limit. Of course, they could also possess 100 different classes each at level 1, but I'm sure you don't need me to tell you just how useless that build
That is not going to be great at all. Oh god.
Now, aside from classes, players could also build their characters to have levels in one or multiple different races, of which there were 700 unique ones to choose from.
That's a lot of
To
choice.
make things a little more
There's a lot going on.
These 700 were divided into the 3 main categories of humanoid, demi-human, and heteromorphic,
Right.
each of which possessed their own positive and negative attributes.
So there's only certain ones you can acquire from being one of those 3.
The purpose of such flexibility was to make it so that no 2 characters would ever be the same.
Right.
I mean, with so many combinations of classes and races being available to pick and
That's kind of
choose
sick.
from, the number of permutations for them quite literally approached infinity.
Oof.
And even if 2 people did purposely build the same character,
Oh, the shell tier fight so
weapons could
good.
be customized any way they want via the in-game creator toolkit. Pretty much everything and anything could be modified the way the player wanted it to be.
Right.
As for the game itself, well, there were 9 different...
We did not get much of an explanation on how the game actually worked, did we? Jesus. It's like, I'm learning all this from this.
over an area that was 2 to 3 times larger than the city of Tokyo.
Whoa.
This was the game in which many players like Satoru Suzuki fell in love with.
I'm watching it like, yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is like stuff that was left out.
Since the game's servers were shutting down after 12 long years
No.
now, Satoru
12
had sent out
years.
an email
That's a
to
long
his
time.
3 other guild members in hopes of one final reunion. But only 3 had actually ended up making an appearance.
Oh.
So, with nothing but free time until the servers shut down, Satoru began to reminisce on the former glory of how his guild used to be. As a group that had once ranked 9th out of all the guilds in the entire game.
That's sick. In a game that's been out for 12 years and you're 9th in the ranks.
That wasn't bad considering there weren't really any active members anymore, but it certainly didn't compare to how it was when they were actually playing.
The golden days.
The only reason they'd been able to maintain such a ranking at all, though, was mainly because of all the items his former guildmates had left behind.
Right.
You see, gear in Yggdrasil was ranked by how much data it contained. The more data an
He
item
does have a
possessed,
lot of
the
stuff to
better
freaking
the
go
rank
to when he's fighting
so,
now, doesn't he?
the items Momonga personally owned, as well as the ones left behind by his fellow guild members, were, as you'd expect, the highest rank of Divine.
Sweet.
That said, All of this was contained within the legendary place known as the Great Tomb of Nazarick. The reason I say legendary is because this was the location where the largest army in the game's history was completely annihilated. Back when Yggdrasil had thousands of guilds trying to make a name for themselves, a massive alliance of over 1,500 players and NPCs had attempted and failed to raid the headquarters of this top 10 guild.
Right.
Part of what made it so difficult was the complex layout of each of
Yeah,
the 10
it's got a lot of stuff going on it.
Floors 1 through 3 were
And each floor's got its own guardians as well.
was an underground lake, 5th a glacier, 6th a jungle, 7th a lava pit, 8th a forest, and the last two being part of this castle-like shrine. Another part was the allowance of what's known as guard NPCs.
There we go.
Because Einzelgon was a guild that possessed a base larger than a castle, the game allowed them to create custom NPCs who could serve as a sort of defense
And
mechanism.
each guild member had one. Is that right?
Into them, but many were made just for the sake of immersion anyway. Only a select few were actually designed in a way that intended for them to be capable in battle. For example, the 41 NPC maids that work within the Great Tomb of Nazarick are completely separate from the battle maids that defend.
Of course, yeah.
Each of the 41 were intricately designed from the custom drawings of the guild member Whiteburn. They certainly don't compare in strength to the battle mates, but they are special insertions from the maid-loving professional mangaka who made them. Anyway, it's after confronting the maids that Momonga would walk through the room known as the Megaton.
Okay.
This is the large domed hall that stands right before the throne room. And although we've never actually seen it in the anime, the mobile game does give us a pretty accurate
Oh,
depiction.
wow, okay, that's cool.
So, as you'd expect from a room named after a grimoire of demonology, all along the curving walls are these alcoves that house their own golem-like statues.
Sweet.
Each is made out of an ultra-rare magical metal, and each is modeled after a different description of Solomon's 72 demons.
Oh, cool.
Then, embedded into the ceiling are these crystal-like lights that serve as the final line of defense before the throne room.
Why, what do they do?
At first glance, they do just seem like intricate.
Oh, here we go.
But should anyone actually make it this far, then these crystals, which are actually monsters, would summon major elementals.
Oh, sick. Whoa.
If all four were to be summoned,
That's a pretty light. Ah, it's killing me.
enough to wipe out at least 12 level 100s.
Whoa.
It was kind of like one last trap right before the true final bosses that awaited in the next room.
That's sick.
Now, once Momonga had got there himself, he was surprised to see that Albedo was carrying the world item Gunenigagap. Normally, these extremely rare and overpowered items were kept in the treasury. But the fact that this one was here in the hands of this NPC meant that her creator had come and given it to her.
Oh, right.
If you're wondering just how rare and overpowered these items are,
Interesting.
well, only 200 exist in the entire game, and
Boom.
a good number are said to possess literal game-breaking and rule-bending abilities. I mean, some are even capable of getting the admins to change the very fundamentals of the game's system.
Oh, wow.
So, to
Okay,
come into
yeah.
possession of even a single world item was actually one of the most prestigious feats to accomplish while playing. For Momonga's guild in particular, his possessed the most out of all the others. Their collection of 11 completely dwarfed the next closest guild's collection of only 3.
Damn, take that.
Years of hard work had allowed them to put together one of the rarest treasuries in the game. That's why all of it was kept locked behind a highly secure vault guarded by the 37 golems known as the Abatinas.
Oof.
Now, with that being most of the details regarding the game world of Yggdrasil, we can now focus on more of the actual plot elements that didn't make it into the anime.
Cool.
Of which there's actually quite a bit more than what we're used to with shows like ReZero or Shield Hero. You see, the Overlord anime tends to simplify the story in a way that somewhat changes the narrative of the light novel.
Interesting.
What I mean is that there are numerous times when the light novel would deliberately present events out of order in order to enhance the overall suspense.
Yeah, and then they switch it all up in the anime, don't they? I know that you did that in Season 3.
Every event is presented chronologically, occasionally resulting in some of that mystery and suspense.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Most often leading to a lack of development for the side characters and world building. So, with all that said, the first large portion cut was the introduction of Carne Village. Right after Ainz had been isekai'd to the New World, the story had shifted itself to the perspective of Henry, giving us a brief glimpse into what her life was like
Okay,
before the raid of
that
the village.
didn't happen, yeah.
The village itself was described to be a small settlement of only 120 people. A remote residential area located just south of the mountainous border between the Empire and the Kingdom.
Right.
Due to its proximity to the forest, Carne was in a prime position to take advantage of all its resources.
Yeah, the Great Tomb of Nazarick's
So,
just there.
the typical day for Henry and many others usually consisted of doing whatever basic agricultural work was needed. It was an uneventful life in which Henry thought would continue forever. A life that, as we know, changed on a day that started just like any other. While while she was out early in the morning getting water like how she usually did. That standard routine was quickly shattered when screams could be heard coming from the distance.
Right.
Her natural reaction was of course to rush back to the village. But the only thing that awaited her was death and destruction.
Oh god.
Once she finally got there, all she could see was many of the people she knew like family being cut down in front of her.
Oh, no.
It was a horrifying sight that made her run straight back home to see if she could find her own family. Luckily for her, all were safe as they had been waiting inside specifically so that Henry could find them. They didn't want her to have to return to an empty house alone. While that did allow them to be together one more time, it was that very hesitation to leave that made it impossible to escape.
No.
The opportunity to flee was no longer available. That's why when we finally get to this part in episode 3, all we see is Henry's mother and father doing what they can to buy time for her. That was what we missed from Henry's perspective.
Oh, wow,
It
okay.
wasn't necessarily a very important element to the overall story, but it does showcase how Henry partially feels at fault for the death of her parents.
Yeah, oh god, we get a little bit more insight into what she's thinking there, Jesus.
Only after looking back to see the shaking head of her mother did Henry understand that she now had to survive for the sake of her sister.
Wow.
Switching back to the moments after the server shut down, it was Momoga's experiment with Albedo that gave us a bit of insight into how he's able to control his power. We didn't get anything entirely specific, but apparently using any of his various abilities was now as natural as it was to breathe.
Yeah, he's just able to just do anything.
Albedo's odd reaction to his touch was due to the damaging effects of his Elderlich passive negative touch.
Oh.
As soon as he realized that this ability was active, the details on how to use it, along with everything else, just completely dawned on him. So, it's really safe to assume that Momonga is completely proficient with every aspect of his level 100 Overlord build. Now,
So there was more behind... That's cool, there's more behind the touch than just her being a freak.
Normally it was only possible to wear one ring per hand, but because Yggdrasil was a very pay-to-win type game, an expensive cash shop item allowed for 10 rings to be worn and used all at the same time.
Cheating!
It was an essential item to have for any player who prioritized their strength. As for the Ring of Einzulgon, well, this was a very crucial item for traversing Nazarick. Not only did it enable instant teleportation,
Just skip all that.
the entire tomb, but it was also the only way to get into the treasury.
Right.
Any other teleportation magic was completely blocked by the tomb's defenses. So, without that ring, a whole bunch of areas would become completely inaccessible.
Very handy to have. Very handy.
The place Momonga teleported to first was the area known as the Amphitheater, an identical replica of the Roman Colosseum. What's interesting to note about it is that this was where every intruder to ever enter Nazarick would be taken.
Yeah, sick in it, and then it's like, right, I'll fight you now. I loved it.
And it was here that no one aside from the 1500-man raid had ever made it past. When that memory had crossed his mind, Momoga began to recall how the raid was a battle that Aura and Mare had died in. It made him wonder if death was something that those two could even remember. See, dying wasn't really the end-all be-all. When it came to Yggdrasil, players who died simply lost 5 levels and a single inventory item.
Oh, okay.
NPCs, on the other hand, could be revived with no penalty and a little bit of money. So, considering that XP wasn't the hardest thing to obtain, dying had become more of a means to respec certain aspects of a player's build. It was an intended part of the game in which players could explore more diverse builds rather than be stuck with what they were.
That's interesting.
The reason this concept was so intriguing to Ainz, though, was mainly because he wasn't sure if Aura and Mare had come back as the same people they were before.
Right.
Perhaps death functioned a little bit differently between players and NPCs. Perhaps every time an NPC came back, they were a completely new existence. Although this was a question that Ainz really wanted an answer to, he certainly wasn't going to ask them about it now.
No.
Right now, the priority was to simply gather information, specifically with regards to his abilities, as well as to see if any NPCs were actually hostile to him. So, while Momonga was doing some experimentation with the staff of Einzulgon, the story switches yet again now to the perspective of Gossip.
Oh, cool.
It's here that the power struggle within the Riestes kingdom is first established, a topic that's really only very briefly touched upon in the anime. Normally this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but to downplay the importance of these seemingly significant matters would result in the omission of one of the most enjoyable aspects of Overlord. The aspect of how Ainz's involvement tends to just completely diminish the significance of everything else.
Yeah. It's like you got these like wars going on and stuff, and then Ainz just turns up and it's like, oh, never mind.
Establishing these supposedly plot-centric characters or events, the more entertaining it is when Ainz just comes in and makes it all seem pointless.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing?
So, with all
I am the
power
Overlord.
struggle of the kingdom was one in which the nobles were orchestrated. Their plan was to use the raided villages as an excuse to send out Gaziv undermanned. They hoped to be able to place him in a situation where he'd be unable to protect the villagers. If the king's so-called strongest soldier couldn't even protect a single village, then that would lay the foundation for an internal conflict. The nobles could begin to question the king's very competence. They could start taking the first steps towards getting him removed from the throne.
Oof.
Of course, Gaziv knew all too well that this was what was happening. But he wasn't about to abandon the lives of people that could be saved. Now, switching back to Momonga,
Oof.
there was a secondary reason behind why he wanted to showcase his abilities in the amphitheater. And that was to demonstrate to a couple of NPCs just how foolish it would be to oppose
Oh,
him.
to try and stand up to him, right?
Momonga still wasn't sure
Right.
just how loyal all these NPCs would actually
So
be.
just in case.
There was a certain loophole regarding their behavior that he was extremely concerned about. What this was that if these NPCs truly acted in accordance with the details of their bio like how he thought, then it was only a matter of time before they would eventually come across a situation in which their bios wouldn't have prepared them for. Plus, if none of their bios mentioned anything about being loyal to him specifically, then that would mean that their willingness to follow orders would be completely up to their own individual discretion.
Damn, a lot of thoughts going on here.
That Momonga knew he couldn't simply disregard. Even if all the NPCs displayed unyielding loyalty right now, there was no guarantee that that loyalty would remain in the future. So, to blindly trust them as they were now was nothing short of utter foolishness.
So it's like, give it time, see what they're like, and oh wow.
What Momonga was sure of, though, was that this new world certainly wasn't the same as the Yggdrasil he was used
There's
to.
some changes.
He was also certain that the NPCs were conscious beings just like humans now. They did seem to be based off their data from Yggdrasil, but their emotions were far too complex to indicate that they were being emulated by code. That being the case, Momonga felt he needed to act in a manner befitting someone who could lead them. So, that's exactly what he was planning to do. Anyway, that's pretty much it for episode 1.
Cool.
I'm not entirely sure when I'll do the next episode, but if you want to see more, then be sure to
Yeah, man, I do.
My main focus for the season is going to be mostly Tensida. But if this video does do fairly well, then I'll try to make this type of content a bit more frequent.
That's cool.
Now, before I go, I do want to mention that I've started streaming a little bit over at Twitch. So, if you want to come and chat while I play a bunch of different video games, then you can follow me at the Twitch link down below. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time.
Ciao. Sweet, I want more of that. There were some really cool changes, and they explained in the game and that. I thought it was really cool. I like how, yeah, like stuff's all over the place. So, simply put, I like how he did that. He just made it more easier to understand. They just make everything chronological instead of everything all over the place. Yeah, interesting. I don't know why, but yeah. And the thought process Irons has for like showing them all the stuff and testing his power and that makes sense. Really does make sense if you plopped in there. You can't just trust everyone straight off the bat. That's cool. And then like seeing the other stuff that happened to those characters. Yeah, I hope he does more. I hope he really does more. But it's cool, like, because I am liking his that Tom was reincarnated as slime videos and that. So that's cool. Yeah, awesome. I would just like to thank my patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to be a patron, the link is down below. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. Thank you very much for that, guys. It means a lot. The list is growing. And thank you guys very much for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave comments down below. Let me know if you should watch us go to future videos, and I'll see you guys. See you guys next time.